Okay, so we're now in Unit 6, which is ratios and proportions, and we're starting with Part 1. In Part 1, we go over some definitions that a ratio is a comparison of two numbers through division. So you might see it as 1 colon 2, 1 to 2, or the way we're really always going to use it is as a fraction, 1 over 2. But the fraction bar does mean division. And we should always simplify our ratios. So remember that because you will be marked off if you do not simplify your ratio. And an equation that sets two ratios equal to each other is called a proportion. So when we say 1/2 equals 4/8, that is a proportion. Okay. Now, a ratio uses division to compare two quantities. The ratio of two quantities A to B, where B is not zero, can be written three ways: A colon B, A to B, and the way we're going to do it in this class, A over B. Each ratio is read the ratio of A to B, and ratios should be written in simplest form. Okay, always simplify your ratios. So now, when we write a ratio, here is an example. You can tell it's very old. Cell phone use. A person makes 6 long distance calls and 14 local calls in 1 month. You're probably all wondering, what's a long distance call? Well, if you called outside your area code, it used to be considered a long distance call, but not anymore. So they want us to find the ratio of long distance calls to local calls. Well, long distance calls is part, and local calls are part. So this is what I call a part to part ratio. Okay, so this would be 6 to 15, but then I have to simplify, divide both by 3, 2 to 5. Now, the next one is what we call a part to whole ratio, because all calls is the whole. So this would be long distance call is 6, but if you did 15 plus 6, total calls are 21. So this is 6 to 21, or 2 over 7. Okay, so again, we always simplify, and we also differentiate between part to part and part to whole. So I always want you to think about it. Is this a part to part or a part to whole ratio? And I have to move this. Okay. So the next page says, Sean and Myra are selling tickets to their school's talent show. Sean sold 36 tickets and Myra sold 44. So those are both parts. I'm anticipating maybe I'll need to know the whole. So if I add it up, the whole is 80. They want to know the number of tickets Sean sold, which is 36, to the number of tickets Myra sold. So it's 36 to 44. But then this is part to part. I'm going to divide both by 4, and I get 9 to 11 because we always simplify our ratios. Now, the next one, they want to know what Myra, and Myra sold 44, is to the amount they both sold, which is 36 plus 44, or 80. So this would be the part to whole ratio. And if I divide by 4, I get 11 over 20. Okay, so that was part to part and part to whole. Now, the next one says, I have 50 Jolly Ranchers in my jar. 20 are cherry, 12 are raspberry, 18 are grape. If I add them all together, that's 50 in total. Okay, so the number of grape to the total would be 18 grape to 50 total, or 9 to 25. The number of blue raspberry, 12, to the number of cherry, 20, or 3 to 5. So number 3 is a part to whole ratio, and number 4 is a part to part. Again, in these, it really doesn't matter, but I want you to get used to thinking about it because sometimes it does matter. Now, I told you that a proportion is when you set one ratio equal to the other. And when you have this, you have a property called the property of proportions, or the cross product property rule. And it says if A over B equals C over D, then A times D equals B times C. And we are going to use this a lot. This is called the cross products equation. So I say 5 times y equals 3 times 15, or 5y equals 45, divide both sides by 5, and we get y equals 9. So we're going to be using the cross products property rule a lot. Now, on the next page, I give one example where you see how it's done, and we're going to do number 2 together. So I'm going to say 8 times A equals 7 times 32. So 8A equals, and 7 times 32 is 224. So now I divide by 8, and 8 goes into 22. So I'll do it this way, 224. 8 goes in twice, which is 16. 8 goes to 64 28 times. So the answer is 28. Okay, now those were pretty simple. And you're going to be doing most of these without calculators. If they get too complicated, we will use a calculator. Now, this next one, you have to be very careful when there's an expression in your proportion. Put parentheses around it. Because when you multiply, you have to multiply both the 8 and the 6. And the most common mistake is to write 7.2a plus 6. And if you write that, you're never going to get this correct. So trust me, you should put parentheses. 21 times 4 is 84. So this becomes 7.2a plus, and 7.2 times 6 is 12, carry the 1, is 43.2 equals 84. And 84 minus 43.2 is 40.8. So I have 7.2a equals 40.8. I divide by 7.2. I divide by 7.2. And again, this is a little complicated, but you do have to show you know how to divide by decimals. So I'm going to change this to 408 over 72, because personally I'd rather do that. I know they're both divisible by 4, so I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 4, and I get 102 over 4 goes in once, 18. Now these are both divisible by 3. So this is 6 on the bottom. 3 goes into 10 3 times, 34 over 6, or 17 over 3. So my answer is 17 thirds, which you can leave as an improper fraction, or you could say it's 5 and 2 thirds. Now, I prefer doing it this way. You could have done how many times does 72 go into 408 and get a decimal answer, but your fraction answer is the most accurate. So I'm happy leaving that as a fraction. Now for this next one, before I even deal with these decimals, what can I do? I'll tell you what I can do. I can change 2.2 over 3.3 to 22 over 33, which I'm then going to change to divide by 11, 2 thirds. So I'm rewriting this whole thing to make it easier for me. And then I'm putting these expressions in parentheses because I want to make sure that when I multiply, I include the parentheses. So 2 parentheses x minus 1 equals 3 parentheses x minus 2. 2x minus 2 equals 3x minus 6. And I subtract 2x from both sides. And I get negative 2 equals x minus 6. And I add 6 to both sides. and I get an answer of x equals 4. Okay, so the answer is x equals 4. And it was made so much easier by simplifying first. So whenever you can simplify, you should. So go ahead and try 5 and 6 on your own. Stop the video. And when you're done, play the rest of the video and see if you got it right. So for number 5, 30 times 2 is 60 equals, put this in parentheses, 6c minus 8. So I have 60 equals 6c minus 48. Add 48 to both sides, and I have 108 equals 6c. And divide by 6. So 108 divided by 6. Well, 6, and I get a 48, and that's an 8. So the answer is C equals 18. Okay, and now for the other one, I have 10 blue, 20 green, and 35 purple. So I have a total of 65. And let's see, blue to green is 10 to 20, which simplifies to 1/2. Blue to purple is 10 to 35, which simplifies to 2/7. And blue to all is 10 to 65, which simplifies to 2/13.